And start recording. So, how's everyone doing today? Excellent. So, you guys are all just doing nothing. All right. So, apologies for being absent on Wednesday. I had eaten some bad food and was not going to be able to get through the lecture. But feeling a lot better today, and I did want to say that I will be pushing back all the assignments that were due after Wednesday, another 2 days to make up for the late lecture. Thank you, Robert. And before I get started with today's content, I wanted to go over a couple more things in FSO. So in the intro, in course materials, along with the just pre-recorded or the current recorded lectures, the course materials, and the pre-recorded materials, there's this common problems. Now this is a document that has a bunch of common issues that we've seen students run into. They have explanations of how to actually fix the issue, along with just further detail that may have gone wrong during different things. All right, so please check that out. In addition to the common problems, there's a common, let's see, where is it? Recorded common questions down here. And these are things like how to test the turn-ins, infinity blade questions, because one of your research assignments has you import the infinity blade assets and stuff, and a quick overview of montage help, which we won't be getting into montages until Monday. So, with that being said, I can jump into today's material, and for that, I'm going to want to open up my previous project, which you can find it inside the library, and just double-click that project that you created before. So today we'll actually be going over creating a projectile and actually having the player be able to shoot something. It won't do any damage. That'll be the next lecture because we don't have any health on any of our characters or anything like that yet. But we will be creating the projectile, have it physically interact with the world, and we'll get that all synced up with animations and everything as well. So, as I can see, I've opened up the same project. Assets were open when the editor was last closed. I don't want to restore because I'll just be opening up all the stuff I need to anyways. First thing I want to make sure is to load that level I created. And it's always a good idea after you've been away for a couple days or something from a project to go ahead and give it a quick play test. See, I got the moving, the turning, and that's about it for this one, but the animations are all playing and everything. So that looks all good. There is one issue right now, and thank you for the online student who pointed that out to me. I did forget something inside my player controller. So when I was setting up the keyboard turning, I was just doing this turn speed times the axis value and adding that input. The problem is I'm never multiplying in time. So if I'm pressing A or D, which immediately sets that axis value to 1, it's going to go frame-based instead of time-based, which is very bad. I need to add another pin and multiply in the, I believe it's get delta seconds, or delta, get world delta seconds. That's going to be the time in between each frame. So regardless of the frame rate, it'll always have the same turn speed. I'm going to go ahead and compile that and give that a quick test. I'll probably be moving much slower now. So A and D are a lot smaller because that time is about 1/60th of a second. So we can go back in and update our turn speed to account for that. We'll say our turn speed's going to be, let's go ahead and go 45, so 45 degrees per second. Compile, save, and give that a quick play. And my turn speed's 45 degrees per second, regardless of what frame rate I'm running at now. Okay, so moving on from there, if we're going to create a weapon, we're going to need something to shoot. So let's go ahead and the delta seconds, I can show that to you again real quick. So my player controller is just getting world delta seconds. That's a timer built into the engine that gives you the time in between each frame. And I'm just multiplying that into our turn speed and our look right. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and close that controller. I'm going to go and let's create a new blueprint. We'll just create a new blueprint. Sorry, tongue got tied there for a second. A new blueprint class. We're going to just go with an actor because I don't need it to be like a pawn. Oh man. Not too much. I just added in delta seconds into the controller from last time, but I'm about to start for the actual content of this lecture, which is going to be creating weapons. Well, creating a weapon and a projectile to actually shoot and sync that up with animations. Alright, so the actor is just basically your game object. Let's start with just the base actor, and we can go ahead and call this projectile. I'm going to open that up. And right now I see it's just got projectile and it's got this default scene root on it. And there's nothing really happening with it. First thing I'm going to want to do is add something so that I can see it. So what I can do in here, right under common, there's this sphere, which is a static mesh component used to create an instance of a static mesh. That sounds perfectly fine with me. So we have this big sphere just kind of sitting there. I'm also going to add some collision for it. So what I want is that sphere collision. And just to differentiate these, because it just named it sphere and sphere 1, I'm going to name that mesh component mesh. And I'm going to name that sphere 1 component, which if we hover over, we can see is the collision, to collision. Keep it kind of easy to read. Now, one thing that's kind of bad right now is my collision has this sphere radius of 32. My mesh, well, it doesn't even have like a radius associated with it. So I need to scale down this mesh. I'm going to say go to 0.6. And if I wanted to change all of these at once, I can actually click this and it'll lock our actual lock or unlock our stuff. So now it's set to what is considered a uniform scale. And if I change one of these values to 0.6, all of them will scale uniformly. Sorry. So with this scaled down to 0.6, we can see that that collision, those lines are actually now on the outside of it. Before they were just inside, which is probably bad because that means our mesh was too big for the actual collision stuff. Because we have this mesh and collision, I just want this sphere collision to be the only one that's handling collisions. First thing we need to do is let's go ahead and drag it in the world and see what happens. So I drag it in a little bit in front of the player and up in the air. If I press play, I see it just kind of sits there. I do have physics reactions with it, so like my player can't go through it, but I still need to do something so that it knows how to move. Because this is a projectile, it should be going similar to like a bullet. If we go back into projectile, well, I can add component, and I said we wanted to get this to move. So I can try movement, and looking down here, oh, there's this one called projectile movement. So it's got a bunch of words there. Basically, it just describes how it updates every frame. If we take a look at that component, I see there's inside the projectile stuff, there's initial speed, max speed, initial velocity, projectile gravity. So lots of different things that we can play around with. Just by adding that component, if I press play, I see it just dropped and went straight through the world. Well, that's not quite the behavior I wanted. What we can do is go in and change this projectile gravity. Instead of being set to 1, we can say 0. So set to 0 for no gravity. Excellent. So now it won't fall, but I still need to make it move. That's where this initial speed and max speed are. So let's go ahead and set up this initial speed. Let's do something kind of slow so that we can see it. So 500 and 500. Compile, save. And let's test that out. If I press play, I see it shoots off into the world and then kind of basically disappears into the skybox background because it's white on white right now. Well, to make that a bit easier to see, we can create a material for it. So over in our art folder, we can right click, create a material, and we're just going to call this m_static color. So this will basically just be a material that associates a specific color with it. Bullet moved by adding the projectile component or projectile movement component to it, and then adjusting the projectile values for speed, max speed, and then disabling the projectile gravity scale. So setting that one to 0. If you're ever glancing at the screen and wondering what values have changed, anytime you change one of the values in one of the base components from default, it'll add this little undo to allow you to reset it to default. So it's a quick way to notice any changes that you've actually made. I can also go up here into this view little eyeball thing. I can say show only modified stuff. So I see all of the stuff that I've modified for this specific component. It's real handy to figure out if you changed something you weren't supposed to, or if you're forgetting to change something that you are. So back over to this material color. We see that it's got that color output with base color and stuff that we've seen before for the materials. I want to actually go down here and I want to be able to specify a specific color for this object. So over here, a bunch of different stuff that I can change. I don't want any of that stuff, I need to add a specific variable. So what I can do, right click, and we'll go ahead and say vector parameter. You guys remember what a vector is? No. Okay, well, a vector is basically just an array of floats. Typically, that's 3 to 4 floats, usually, unless you're working in 2D dimensions. The fourth one for a vector parameter would be an alpha value for that color. And if I take a look over back at the details panel, I see that it's added this new category called default or material expression vector parameter. Now right now, it's got the default value of just 0, 0, 0. And this vector, if I double click on it, we can actually set the color. So I'm thinking a red bullet to signify danger. So I can grab that, drag that over, make it a lot more red. And I noticed it didn't update here. If I click OK, I see that this is not connected to any of the colors. And this top node is the actual full on all 4 of these as a vector. If I take off each one of these, it'll just be a single float, which is bad. I want all of them passed over to color. Now we have a nice red and kind of shiny bullet. That'll be pretty nice to see. I press save, give it a second. Did you hook up the color to the base color? Then did you set the color itself? It may take a moment to update in there. All right, well, I'll have to help you out afterwards then for the specific color, but checkered will be fine. This is more just cosmetic to make it a little bit easier to see. Now, I want to actually rename this parameter, because right now it's just got the name of none, which is bad. So, and I clicked over there. Don't want that, 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 and one parameter group name none. That's fine. I want to click back on this this parameter and scroll up to the top, which I didn't do before. So with this node selected, I can change the parameter name, and we'll just say color. And I don't need to worry about setting a group or sort priority because there's only going to be this one variable or one parameter for this actual material. Compile, save. Okay. And now we need to actually make sure to apply that material to our projectile, because our projectile still doesn't even know about that material. So materials are always stored on the mesh. Down here we have that materials array, and we can specify that material. And I think I called it static color, m_static color. So I click on that. It's got the red color to it. We'll give that a quick save. Now when we play, we see it shooting off into the distance, and it's a very slow projectile, but that's on purpose just so that we can test it out and see exactly what's happening with it. So I'll stop playing. Now that we have something to shoot, we're going to need to add some sort of controller for it so that our player can actually shoot these. Well, typically projectiles are shot from weapons. So let's go ahead and create a new class. And this will be a blueprint component. Or, actor component. So I can do blueprint class, and down here we have actor component. And we'll just name this weapon base. This will be our basic definition of our specific weapon. We can create children classes for special weapons or things like that. If I take a look at that class, it's just like all the other new blueprints we create, and it's just totally blank. It's got the begin play and tick, just like how anytime you created a C# script, it always had the start and update in it. And we're going to need to add a couple of functionality to this. We want our player to be able to shoot, right? So we're going to need to add a function inside here that will shoot. Over here to the left, we see that there are different functions we can add. We can add a function, and it created a new node and is in a separate tab from the event graph. We'll go ahead and call this shoot. So we can compile. And our shoot, well, it's the one that's going to need to spawn projectiles. In order to know what projectile we want, we can add a variable. Our variable name, well, we'll call this projectile type. And over in this type, we want a base projectile. We have object types projectile. And we're just going to use the object reference. In order to spawn things inside Unreal, you can right-click and do spawn actor from class. Right now it's saying spawn actor none. That's because I haven't selected any class yet. For our class, I can notice that our projectile type is a blue variable. Well, that means I selected the wrong variable type. So let's check again what other types of projectiles we can create. There's the object reference, class reference, which is always purple. We want that class reference. We can drag this in and drag it right on top of that pin. And boom, our projectile type is now associated for what we want to spawn. I'll connect the exec so it goes from shoot to spawn actor. Compile, and I see there's errors. Reading these errors, current value of spawn transform pin is invalid. Okay, so I need to specify a place to spawn. Well, for right now, let's just go ahead and get actor get transform. And I don't want tile transform, So because this is just a component, it doesn't actually have a position in the world. What we can do is get owner and so our target will be an actor instead of actor component. So this is returning an actor reference. And from the actor, we can get actor transform. Sorry if it's a little scrunched up on the screen. Move that around. Make this bigger. There we go. And plug our actor transform into where we want to spawn it. Okay. There's also this instigator. Instigator is basically just a pawn object reference, and that will actually associate this spawned bullet with a specific like pawn or player or character in your game. So it's very good to set those. You should be able to pass in, can't pass in the owner because I need the controller of the owner or the pawn reference. So from the actor, I can cast to pawn and we'll move that stuff over a bit because this one needs to be executed. We'll do the cast, and when the cast succeeds, we'll spawn that actor. If it fails, we can do what is called print string and output a little bit of debug information. So the string we want to print, tried shooting from non-pawn. And then as the pawn, we can pass that directly into the instigator. And you'll see any of the errors down here will show up on the nodes themselves as well, so that you have a quick reference of where that error is. If we compile now, no more errors. We can save this. And we'll just go ahead and check this out. We need to let our character know about this weapon. So we'll close that. We want our base character, because enemies and our player will also have this. So our base character, we're going to need to add a component. Well, we just created that weapon. So we have the weapon base. On this weapon base, I'm going to rename it from weapon base so that it's just going to say current weapon, so that it can use this same interface for any of the children weapons that we create, even if the character picks up a special weapon or secondary or third weapon. And we're going to need some sort of input for our player to shoot. So all of our inputs should be done through this player controller. We also have to remember to add the mapping inside the project settings. So in here, back down to input, instead of an axis mapping, well, this is going to be an action mapping. An action is just going to be fired once. An axis is basically being updated every single frame for its current state. Actions will fire once you press the button. For the action mapping, we'll just simply call it shoot. Keep everything a similar name. And for our shoot, I'm going to go ahead and say mouse. I'm going to do the left mouse button. So remember, because I just changed an input setting, I'm going to need to re-export this INI file. And I'm just going to overwrite the one that's there. So I just click on it, click Save, and replace it. Just so that I always have an updated INI file ready for submission. All right. So we need our player controller to actually call that shoot function from our character, or from our base character. But right now, my player controller doesn't really know about the specific base character. What we can do is create something called an interface to talk between these two blueprints. For this, I'm going to just save all so that everything's saved. I'm going to need to right click. I'm going to create a blueprint down here in the advanced asset. We're going to be creating a blueprint interface. So as you can read down there, it's just saying basically it holds a list of functions that can be shared between two blueprints and don't necessarily need to have an implementation. So this will allow our player controller to talk directly to that character base without having them directly know about each other. We will call this I_character. Okay. In here, I want to add a function. Right now, as you can see, it says read only. So this isn't a graph that you can actually add functionality in. It's just a list of the functions, and there are different inputs and outputs and things like that to be shared for classes that use this interface. So on this new function, I'm going to rename that, and we'll call this shoot. So I can go ahead and compile, save that. I didn't add any inputs or outputs, so it's just a pure function call. And over in our player controller, up here in this new tab that I haven't covered before, there's this class settings. Here's where you actually add interfaces. As you can see, because it's a character controller, it already has this nav agent interface inherited on it. I'm going to also want to add that interface we just added. So I_character. Click on that, and I see it's got this implemented interfaces with that character on it. I'm going to compile. Going to character base, I also want this to have that character interface. Add I_character. Give that a quick compile. And we can add a shoot inside our character base. So if I just go up here and type shoot, I see a bunch of different things. So there's the input action and stuff, but I want to do all my inputs inside the controller. I see the class right here is an interface call. Well, I want to actually just overload this adding event for shoot. So we'll do event shoot from my character. We're going to want to call our current weapon and make sure our weapon knows to shoot. And this will just be a simple call to the function shoot. And add event from my character. And make sure the class is compiled, otherwise that interface that you had selected won't show up. So when our character receives an event for shoot, it'll tell the current weapon to shoot. We can compile that, save that, and our controller needs to actually send that message, because our controller is where that input access or input event is going to be done. So we called an input called shoot. We have this action event. So anytime character presses, or the player presses that key, which is left mouse button, we want to go ahead and call the shoot interface. So we can do that shoot interface call. All right. Compile, save, and now give it a test. The lecture will be recorded, so perhaps you could watch that afterwards. So I press play, I click my mouse button, and nothing is happening. I get my mouse back, and we're going to want to track down why this is happening. So starting from the very beginning, this input action shoot is the first thing. We're going to go ahead and add a breakpoint on that. We can go back into the game and clicking right on there, it brought up the blueprint and is paused with this big red arrow on there. So right now that means it got to here and it's about to go to there, following that execution line. I don't want to just remove or resume. I don't want to skip. I want to step into. So stepping into will just progress one node or go into a function if it's called on that line. I see shoot. I'll do step into from here. And it's on the input axis move forward, which was an odd step. But it went to shoot and nothing happened. That basically means our character interface wasn't properly overloaded inside our character base. It has the event shoot and it's calling target weapon base, but it's not going through that character interface. If we add a breakpoint right here, add a breakpoint, and play it again, you make sure to try and shoot. We see it got to that input action, step into, and we're at the character interface, and it skipped out of that and is on the move forward. So clearly, that's not implemented correctly. So over here, we have an event called shoot from my character. And this little thing means it's going through a message or an interface. Our controller, down here where we're doing that input, we're calling shoot on ourself. So that's the problem. We don't want to just call shoot on ourselves. We want to call shoot from our character. So what we can do is add get controlled get controlled, come on. I could do that, or I could just go through and do the pawn. There should be just a get pawn from this interface. I'm just looking for the right one. So get pawn, get owner. Nope. Wow. Could be get controlled pawn. All right. So from the controller, we're getting the controlled pawn. We can cast this pawn, cast to, and we have character base. And we'll just cast it to the character base. So when it's pressed, does the cast as the character base. Well, we know it has that shoot function. And we want to call this shoot on the character base. Although that's going to look for a function, I think I just realized what I did. But let's just go ahead and do shoot, and we're going through iCharacter, calling this message. We're going to send a message to our base character to shoot. So we go ahead and save, compile, save, and give this one more go. So I press play, I click, we're at that action, input action, step into, we're casting, the cast succeeded, so it's over at the shoot. We'll step into it this time, and it popped out. Step into, after a couple more clicks, after going through the interface, is now at our weapons base shoot. So it's now going to the right stuff. But there we go. And this is going to cast it to a pawn. And we're getting to the spawn actor. So I'm going to go ahead and just press resume. Move back to our game view. And I want to remove these breakpoints because I don't need them anymore. And down here, if I shoot, still nothing going on. So there's something wrong with our spawning. Inside our spawn actor, well, this is right where it's actually creating that projectile. Let's check out the data at that point. So we press play, jump back to our game view, and I clicked, so it's at spawn actor. We're passing in projectile type into this class, and it says current value equals none. Any guesses as to why the class is saying none? Nope. Okay, so basically the problem is, even though I created this variable, I never gave it a default value. So we need to make sure that it's set to a specific projectile. We'll compile. We'll save. We'll go over to the play screen. And now when we're here, it's saying actor is the projectile. Spawn transform is our current actor's position. And instigator is just that pawn object. So that looks all good. I can remove that breakpoint. And we can continue playing. Crap. Forgot I paused it in the blueprint. I have to press resume. Now over here, every time I click, I spawn a beach ball sized projectile from the center of my actor, and it's pushing me back every single time. So let's go ahead and clean that up a bit, and I can spawn as many as I want and just kind of shoot them off all into the distance. Do you guys think that'll be a problem in the end? Nah. No, your computer's got infinite memory, so you can have an infinite number of projectiles. Oh yes, just download more RAM, of course. Alright, so we need to come up with a way of destroying these projectiles after a certain amount of time. So let's stop playing. And inside a projectile, we can create an event to destroy the bullet. We can go ahead and add a function or an event. Let's do event-based. So add event, and there's several different things that we could use that are built in. I want to go ahead and just have totally new functionality. So on our begin overlap, we have begin play. So when it starts, I want to say I want to keep this alive for about 3 seconds. 3 seconds is a really long time in a game, especially for a projectile once we increase that speed. There's something called add or function by, so set timer by function name. You could also do set timer by event name. But you guys seem less familiar with the events, so I'll just cover the function for right now. So we're going to set a timer by a function name. And for one, we're going to need what object we want to reference, a function name, time, and if it's looping or not. Well, right now I don't have a function created. We need to add one. And this new function, we'll go ahead and call it destroy self. And what that'll do is destroy actor with the target of self. So over in the event graph, for our object, well, we want it to be this projectile. We can drag off here and say get reference to self. Function name was destroy self. Now it's very important that this function name matches perfectly. So I see destroy self and destroy self. Perfect. Proper capitals and everything. For the time, well, I said 3 seconds. And looping is not checked. I don't have that function returning anything, so there won't be any return handle. And I don't need to do anything after, because this object will be destroyed after that timer's been set. We'll save that. Go back to the world. Give it a quick play. And before I start making projectiles, up here in this world outliner, I'm going to search through and look for projectiles. So now, anytime I create one, it'll pop up in that world. And I see it's deleting all those actors after the 3 seconds. Okay, so now our bullets destroy themselves perfectly fine. We still need to have some sort of change because our bullets are the size of a beach ball, which is bad. Let's go in and we can change the projectile. We can set it to have a specific scale. We can add a new variable, and this variable will be called projectile scale. Variable type, well, I'm going to need a vector, a 3D vector, because we have X, Y, and Z scale. And I need to compile it before I can set a value for it. So we'll compile, and now I can actually set it. I'm going to say I want it to be 1/3 of the size. So more baseball sized instead of beach ball. So 0.3 across there. And then on begin play, so when it first starts, I can do it after it sets the timer because the timer won't trigger until 3 seconds later. We can set actor scale and we can pass in the projectile scale. Okay. Compile and save. And now, when we start, they're much better and more projectile-like. They're still spawning out of the center of my character, and it's pushing me back. So that seems to be a problem. There's also nothing limiting the amount of bullets I can spawn per second. So before we get into the animation syncing up, would you guys want to take 10-15 minute break? All right, so we'll say come back at 10 after, so 13-minute break. All right. We're going to be syncing up the animations so that it plays a shooting animation and I'm no longer just able to spawn bullets like crazy. We're also going to make sure that the bullet spawns outside of the character's mesh and based on its hand. First thing we want to do is open up our PGF2 assets, and we're going to need to find our skeleton. That'll be inside the animated meshes, inside mannequin. There's this UE4 skeleton. Now what I want to do is actually move this into my assets because I will actually be changing values in it, and I want to make sure that I submit those changes. Otherwise, I'll just have the base PGF2 assets without where that bullet needs to spawn and everything. So we can drag this UE4 skeleton and drop it into the art. So it says move or copy. I want to make sure to move. And then it's updating the references. And sometimes takes a while because there's quite a few animations and stuff. Alright, so if I take a look in art, I see that that now has the UE4 skeleton. Down in our mannequin folder, it just has the skeletal mesh and the physics asset, so it doesn't have the skeleton in here anymore. That's how I want it to be. Now, anytime you change assets in their location, or adding whenever you're removing an asset or moving it, you want to right-click the content folder and select Fix Up Redirectors in Folders, or in Folder. Basically, it goes through and changes everything from local to its current setup. So instead of like changing that the skeleton to go up 2 folders and then into art, it now just goes directly to Content Murphy Art. So you want to get into the habit anytime you're moving an asset, fixing up the redirectors. I'm also going to go ahead and playtest this to make sure that moving that skeleton didn't break the normal animations. And I see that that's all working perfectly fine. So, with that, in our folder, so that we can start modifying it, let's go ahead and open it up. So here is what the skeleton is. These are a list of all the different joints, and we can see it goes up all the way down through each finger and everything. Well, I want to basically add something off of the right hand. So I see right here we have clavicle L or clavicle R, one for left and one for right. We'll go down the clavicle R and move down to kind of the middle of the hand. So we can go ahead to middle, and I'll do it off the very tip of the middle finger. And right click, and we can add a socket. A socket is just a transform that you can reference in game for your whatever purpose you need. For us, it will be where our projectile is going to spawn. And we can name this spawn pause for our current spawning position. Over here in this window, I can move around just like in the normal Unity, or normal Unreal. And I want to actually switch it to the transform, or translate objects, move it out from that hand a little bit. So I move it, get it into a kind of close position towards the front of the hand. And we can save that. So now, if I take a look at that attacking animation that we have, so we have our animations down here. So many big windows popping up over. There should be a punch start or punch 1. This is an animation sequence. So it's sitting there and does a punch and continues to loop. If we take a look at these different frames, see it come out and the arm's fully extended and then goes back. I don't want punch 1. That was the wrong one. I want to basically create a new sequence for punch to go through start, middle, and end, because we have punch start, punch end. Let's check out that punch start. So that's like a wind up. It's hard to see when it's just looping like that. And if we're scrolling through, so it basically starts with his arms up, moves his arm back, and then we have the normal punch that we can play, and then the end. We want to link all of these together. So I'm going to close out all these extra windows up here, and we'll just reopen the ones we need. So in our art, we can create a new animation. We can do what is called an animation composite. It asks for the skeleton. We want that UE4 skeleton that is currently in the path game, Murphy Justin, art. Yep. And we'll call this AC punch. We can open that up. And right now, nothing's happening because we haven't told it what to start from. Well, when we were looking at them, we're going to want to, and I am sharing, right? Yeah. Okay. That would have been awkward. We're going to start with that punch start. Yeah. So we have a punch start, and I can drag and drop this over here. See, it's doing that wind up. Then I can do punch one. Oh, and that was punch one end. I wanted punch one in the middle. Okay. So now we have a nice full complete animation that we can use at once. I also want to make sure that I'm going to the spot where his arm is fully extended. So right around frame 17 or so. And if I take a look over at the skeleton tab, I can go down here and find our exact spawn position. So that's going to be the spawning position of our bullet. I can move that around to get a better spawning position now that I have it posed in the correct angle. So I click Save. And we're going to want to add what is called a notify. So down here in this notifies, I can add a track right here, which I didn't mean to add a track. Sorry, the window was too small. I want to actually add a notify. Should be able to right click, add notify, new notify, and our notify name will be spawn projectile. Okay. So let's actually get our animation to start playing this when the user presses that left mouse button instead of just spawning the bullet right from there. For that, we're going to want our character base. We're going to need to add some sort of a event for character base to know. We have this shoot event, but I don't want it to actually immediately shoot when we just what is it? Yeah, I want it to just start playing an animation based off of when the player presses that button. not immediately go to shoot. So we're going to need to add another event, and that needs to be done through the character interface. So back from our level view, in our character interface, we have shoot, but I also want to just add a start attack, because this will let our animation system know that we want to start playing the attack animation. Compile, save. Then in our character base, we'll do a recompile real quick, save it, and start attack. We're going to add an event for start attack. This event, we're going to need to tell our animation system that we want to play a specific animation. Well, to do that, let's check out our animation system and get that up to par first. In our animation, and just clicking back on the runs idle and the anim graph, we can go into our locomotion state machine. We see we just have idle and run. Well, I need to add that attack in here. And we'll add that. AC punch is just fine. We'll compile, save. I need to add another variable to let our animation system know about it. I can name it isAttacking. So our isAttacking, just being a bool, that's totally fine. We'll say it can go from idle to punch when that isAttacking is true. And I can just send the bool directly over like that. Compile, go back to the locomotion. Still need a way to get back from punch. Well, what I can do is go into this and do a quick check for our current attack, time remaining. So we'll do time remaining on punch, and we'll check that if it's less or equal to float versus float, and I'm going to say less than or equal to 0.2. And connect the bool pin up. Save, compile. Going back to our locomotion, I can check out the preview editor. I press true, and I see it's just constantly looping. It's trying to go back to idle. I'm not sure if you guys can see that in the recording, but it's flickering on there after it plays the attack animation every time. That's because we still need to let them know to stop, or to set this bool to false after that animation is finished. So in here, if you click on the specific state, there's this left state event. In that left state event, we can actually add a name for what event we want to call. Well, our name is stop attacking. We'll go ahead and compile. And over in the event graph, we can define what that event will do. Yeah. So in here, you can right click and say stop attacking. We see we have that anim notify stop attacking. And when that's called, we can set is attacking to false. And for bools, just turning this as a check mark or no check mark changes it from true to false. So this is going to set that is attacking to false when it leaves the attack state. We'll go back through and test that out. In here in the preview editor, if I check is attacking, it attacks once and returns back to idle. Okay. So that's basically what we want to do for the animation. Now we need to let our character controller actually get this to start playing. So we have our start attack. It needs to tell our meshes animation about this. So in event begin play, I'm going to, from the mesh, call get animation, get skeletal, oh come on, get anim instance, that's the one I want. So getting the animation instance, we're actually going to want to store this into a variable, so we don't have to type mesh get anim instance every time. We also want to make sure that it's cast to our specific animation instance. So we're going to need a cast, and if I remember correctly, we called ours my animation. So we're going to cast it to my animation. So we connect that from begin play because we only want to do this once, so we're not checking it every frame and doing all this casting and redirecting. And actually I have that written down below right beneath it, but we're going to store it as a variable. So as my animation, I can right click that pin and promote it to a variable. And I can call this variable my animation, or my anim. Keep it slightly different than the actual name of the class. So, as you can see, I already did that last time to get the speed set. Instead of doing it that way, I no longer need all of these nodes. I can select them and delete, because I now have it stored in this simple variable right there. So it's much cleaner, and we'll be using it a reasonable amount. So when we want to tell our animation to start attack, we can bring that my anim up, get it, and tell it to start attack. Which I did not do correctly because I never added an event for that in this. Yes, that is my bad. So we have the stop attacking inside our animation, but we also need one for start attacking. So we're going to add an event, and this will be a custom event. So just type custom, add custom event, and our custom event name will be simply start attacking. And just like up here, I can even copy and paste using Control-C and Control-V that node. But instead of leaving this blank, we want to turn that on. Compile, save our animation, and from our character, instead of start attack, because that was the wrong one, from our animation, we will be doing start attacking. And I'll just call that function. You can give that a save. Open up our character controller. And instead of shoot, calling the shoot directly, I want the shoot to start attacking. So I'll just break the links here. And as character base, we added that event for start attacking. Or start attack is what we called it. Is that the one I want? Crap. 1 second. Yes, start attack is the one I want. Start attack. And I want that to go through the interface, so we'll be doing the interface call. I'm going to get rid of the shoot, because our player controller doesn't need to know about that. But our player character does need to know when the event spawn bullet or spawn projectile back in our animation. Whoops, jumping all over the place, sorry. So we're back in our locomotion graph. On this, we called it stop attacking. That's going to just set that bool. We need to do the the AC punch. We have the spawn projectile. That's the one I was looking for. So on that anim notify, we need to actually spawn the projectile. Well, we have the character interface for event shoot, and all that does is tell our weapon to shoot. So we can go to our animation. We can go to our event graph. And we need to make sure we're calling that interface. So we have the anim notify of spawn projectile. When that happens, we need to tell our player to shoot. So get sorry, I got lost. So we need to get our player somehow and tell it to shoot. I can add the character interface to our animation. And we'll add the character interface. We'll compile. We'll save. And our character interface has that shoot. So inside our animation, in our event graph, we can go ahead and call that shoot. So we'll do, what was it, just shoot. And we want to go through that interface. Our target, don't want it to be self, I want it to be the character. So I can drag off, and we're going to need to get our player character inside here. So get controls, get player controller. No. I want get. I added the animation interface, or the interface over here in the class settings. Down here you can click the add and select whatever interface you want. So let's compile, save, and that's calling the iCharacter. Let me check something real quick, because I do want the interface call. iCharacter. Nope, don't want to cast. Nope. Shoot. I am drawing a blank right now for some reason. Anyways, let's check this out and see if that's working. Before I reference notes, we'll press play. I press punch and it played the animation, but it didn't actually play the, it didn't actually spawn a bullet. So our shoot interface is still incorrect. I can delete that. Get owner. Get character. Oh my god. Give me 1 second to take a look at the notes real quick. Get, is it? Get, that's player controller ID. No. Because I'm in the animation. Get controller. That's from pawn. That's not going to work. It says the target is controller. Well, getting the controlled pawn. Cast 2. And doing the cast would be bad, but it should work. And we want not my animation, not my player. We want base character, or character base. And we'll test this out this way, which is a roundabout way of doing it, but it should get it done. As character base, we will call shoot. And character base, shoot. And we will send a message, because we have that as an event. All right. Yep, figured that was going to throw an error. Give me 1 second, I'm going to stop recording for a moment. Okay, we're back. I remembered what it was now. It's called try get pawn owner. It's a very weird way of going about it. So from there, I can pass that in to our character base, which we'll call the shoot. We compile, all good, and just make sure, yep. We'll save it. Over here, we'll go ahead and try and play. and we're spawning, but it's still spawning from my lower abdomen. So we need to actually tell it where to spawn instead of just spawning at the location. Well, inside our weapon is where we have that spawn actor. And that's where we're giving it that get actor transform. Instead of get actor transform, I want to actually get the mesh from that and specify where I want to shoot. So what I can do is add a way for our player control, or our base character to send that information over to shoot. Well, I could send it right here because it's calling that shoot function. I just need to change how that shoot function works. Inside our weapon base, we have the function shoot, and I can simply just add an input with a transform. And type of transform. And compile that. And now we have a pin on the entry point of this shoot that'll take in a transform. We can drag this transform right over to the spawn. And move this around so it's a little bit cleaner to see. I no longer need that get actor transform. Now, anytime I'm calling shoot, I need to specify where to shoot from. And that would be inside our character base. I see it's got a new pin on this transform. And I need to actually have it. I'm going to need to use that anim. So my anim get socket. I believe this is just off of the mesh for the socket name. So instead of that, get rid of from mesh, get socket, and we can do get socket transform. Well, I only really care about the location, so I'm going to just do get socket location, and I'm going to make my own transform right here. I'm going to say I just want this to shoot forward from the direction the character is facing. So we can get a rotation just by getting actor rotation. I'm going to move that over. From this transform, if I drag off backwards, I can make a transform, which simply takes location, rotation, and scale. Location, rotation, and our scale we can leave 1 because it's set to, our bullets are specifically set to auto scale when they spawn. Compile, save, and then give this one more shot. Play, I shoot, and apparently the bullet spawned at my feet. So I shoot, and he keeps getting pushed forward. That's kind of interesting. That's not quite what I wanted to happen. So, Something is wrong with this get socket location. I didn't specify what name of socket I wanted. Well, I named this socket spawn pause. We'll go back over to our character and specify what socket we want. It was spawn POS. Compile, save, and shooting the bullet now comes from the hand. All right. So we're running low on time, so I will just do, I guess we'll be picking up with reloading and stuff next time. All right, any questions about any of the stuff we've done today? I know I was kind of all over the place, but no? All right then. I'm going to go ahead and stop the recording.